Alright, let's get into today's video because today's going to be an interesting one. Kriga Bundalo. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Welcome to the library. And as you guys know, I'm coming to you from here because, well, what we talk about on this channel is a lot of book stuff. Normally we talk about Robert E. Howard and Conan the Barbarian, the whole Hyborian Age stuff. That's not what we're talking about today. If you got here, you saw the thumbnail back there. Today what we're doing a complete review of the Philip Jose Farmer, I always get that wrong, book, Hadon of H. Opar. Now, the reason why we're going through this one is because I actually already read book number 2 of this series, and I'll put a link to that one up over here for you guys who haven't seen that yet. That really floored me, and honestly, it led me down this long, meandering garden path. This is me continuing down the meandering garden path, though, just in case okay, back from the garden path. Okay, it led me down that, where I was convinced in the back of my head that this was clearly some sort of Hyborian Age world that we were borrowing from. And the characters in here, in my mind, were actually reused Robert E. Howard characters. I was dead wrong. And I will admit that right now. And actually, I'm honestly very glad I was wrong because what I've now found out is how much world building this guy did in these actual books. This was really well done. So I said this deserves a video. So we're going to do another one in the series of Tennessee Facts. What are you reading right now? And that's this video. So the way we're going to structure this, we're going to do a next chapter. Next chapter we're going to go into, we're going to talk through roughly, well, high level, what is the story? And a spoiler alert right now, some things unfortunately are going to be given away. Well, if you watch that second book, some things will have already been given away already, but never mind that now. Then we're going to go into some things in the following chapter, which were, what did I think was done really well here? Because there are some really interesting aspects of this book, which not only would make you sword and sorcery sort of fantasy readers interested in it, but also some art appreciation should be done in this very book. Then we're going to go into another chapter where we say, well, what was weird here? Because honestly, there were some things that were weird. And I don't know. Maybe it's just a me thing, but we'll talk through that. Then we'll come back to the end of this one and we'll talk about next steps. And the reason why I say next steps, because even though I've already read book 2 of the series, which then maybe so, okay, now we need book 1 of the series. Now we need to go back and buy something even earlier. Ugh. We'll get to that when we get there. First, let's get into the story. All right, let's get into the story itself. Now, this right here. This is the part where, spoiler alert, we're going to talk through the story. So, for those of you who are still here now, I'm assuming you want to know what happens, okay? So, let's back up now. We've had that conversation. So here, oh, by the way, here's what happens in this story. Okay, effectively, and I'm going to explain this to you in D&D terms, it's 2 quests and a dungeon crawl. Okay, that's it. So here, let's a little more diving now. All right, we already know where book 2 starts because we already did a video for that on this channel. And you know that starts with Hadon at the top of a mountain range with a narrow pass, fending off an entire army with an injured Lalita. She's twisted her ankle. She can't walk. So we know that's there. And we know the rest of his party has run off into the woods and they're gone. And he has stayed behind to give them time so they can escape. Very heroic thing to do. But who are all these people? And how the heck did he end up there? Well, that's what this story is. So, the thing starts off with 2 quests, and then we get to a dungeon crawl, which then leads to that. So, high level. And by the way, we're going to skip a lot of characters here because really, they ain't that important. Hadon is the main dude here, and Hadon is a very different individual as compared to the world around him. He starts off being fairly similar in that, you know, he's been indoctrinated into the culture. He believes the religious dogma. He believes the societal norms. He's gone off and volunteered to be part of the Great Games in which basically everybody competes to the death or damn near close to it so that they can win the hand of the queen and become the new king. This is Hadon's eventual goal, or he wants to die along the way. It's one or the other. Now, he does have second thoughts while he's there. And really the story starts off with a long, arduous journey from his outskirt town of Opar to the capital of the kingdom to do this competition. Now, I will say this right now. Opar, based on everything we know about it from the second book, is a far better city than the capital itself, which is kind of interesting. But moot point, that really ties into the whole Tarzan mythos, which goes down the road, which is why we do the Kriga bundle at the beginning of all of our videos. Never mind that now. He's made his way to the Great Games, and guess what? He's the hero. So quest 1, win the Great Games. Guess what? He does, okay? We're going to skip through that. Everybody dies, except for him. He makes it, and he's getting there, and this is really where the character development starts to happen. He's going up to the queen. He's like, all right, here we go. Great ceremony. I'm going to be made the new king. He's right there ready to do it. And Minruth, who's the existing king's like, And I could picture at this point in time Hadon's face. It'd be something like this. Are you freaking kidding me? Anyways, what happens is Minruth has decided that he doesn't want to give up to this whole kingship thing. He doesn't want this guy to marry his daughter. And he's got a very convenient quest here because he sent an expedition party to the north and they met some crazy blonde lady up there. And they met somebody who says they're Sahhindar. Now, Sahhindar is a banished god from their overall deity, their pantheon of gods. So meeting Sahhindar out in the woods in the far north where theoretically your religion doesn't even exist because you're in the outskirts at this point in time, that's a weird thing. And Sahhindar actually means something quite important to Minruth in his overall plan. So Minruth's got a couple opportunities. He's saying, oh, you know what? If I can get this Sahhindar guy back here, that'd help my long-term game plan. And on top of that, if I could take this guy and say, no, you need to go on an additional quest, wherein he could potentially just get killed anyways. And then nobody comes back, and I just move ahead with my plan anyways. That's perfect. So what does he do? Nope, Hadon, you're not marrying my daughter. Here's a group of the worst people in my own army. People who are going to get you killed. Head off into the Northlands and find this blonde lady, this guy who was raised by wolves, and this banished god. Bring him back for me. And once you do that, you can totally marry my daughter. And Hadon's like, and this is the thing where you start to see the change in Hadon, which is why at the end of the second book, he's very much a different person. He's disenchanted with the actual culture around him. He's questioned everything at this point in time. And he's starting to see that really what drives this is his own personal greed of individuals in power. Quite an interesting change for him. But he heads off, goes on up there. He meets his cousin. We'll talk a little bit about his cousin Laser. His cousin is an ass. I'm going to say that right now. But we meet him later. At the end of the day, ends up finding Lalita, finds Lalita's daughter. That's right, Lalita came with a daughter, Lalita being the blonde lady that was referenced earlier. Finds the guy who was raised by wolves, has a lot of conversations about Sahhindar, not necessarily finding him. And then they come back. Unfortunately, on the way in coming back, because they bring back his cousin, who's banished, they then become arrested. They get back home at the end of the day. Minruth's like, well, no, you broke the law. You brought your cousin back. So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to just put all of you in prison. And this blonde lady, you're rather good looking. So I'm going to take you as one of my wives. Oh, and by the way, while you were gone, I completely overturned the entire deity structure and our actual level of succession. So I'm going to now be king and deified, by the way, forever. And you're stuck in the dungeons. Now, again, this is another one of those moments where I could picture Hadon's face where he does more of this like, are you freaking kidding me? Because really, things have not gone well for him. He's done 2 quests now, both of which were things that his society has told him to do, either directly through societal pressure or from a direct order from the king. And he's been screwed on both of them. And at the end of the day, he actually ends up escaping from the dungeon. I'm not going to say how. I am going to say there is a benevolent act of God that makes this happen, which is quite humorous in how it actually plays out. And shows actually the strength of this author because he clearly knows what he's talking about. And it's quite funny. And he ends up getting away, escaping into the Northlands. Lalita ends up twisting her ankle on the way. And this is what leads us into the second book, where he is now up at the top of this mountain range fighting off an army who's chasing him with Lalita with a twisted ankle and has sent the rest of his party on north to try to escape. Why are they escaping? Because Minruth has overturned the entire deity structure and they are now outlaws. Quite an interesting story. And I can see why they left you on that cliffhanger at the end, because at that point in time, there was a fairly pivotal change in some of the character dynamics. So the author was smart here saying, well, since I'm throwing in this change right now, this is also where we'll throw in new book. Quite good. There's your overarching story. This is what it is. So for those of you who stuck around, I hope I didn't ruin too much of it for you. That's it. Now let's get into some of the really cool things in here and start doing some deep dive. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to limit ourselves to just 2. Only 2 aspects of this book that I think went really, really well, just for the sake of brevity, because I babble enough, and quite frankly put, if you just keep me, I'll just keep going. And nobody wants that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about 2 different aspects of this. One being the administration, and the other one being the actual work of the author and the story itself. And you're going to have to forgive the whole spinny thing over here. It is cooking in here. And I've had enough of just being baked while I'm continuing to shoot these stupid videos. And that doesn't mean baked in the other sense, in case any of you are curious. So here's the deal. Let's talk about a piece of admin. And I mean admin here because I'm talking about the actual tactile nature of the book. And I'm talking about an aspect of this that was pointed out to me by one of the viewers when we talked about our review of the second book in this series. And it had to do with the art. I made a comment where I said, you know, there's some really cool depictions within this that add to the story overall. And one of the viewers, one of you out there actually said, actually, Tennessee fans, you should look into this. There's this Roy Krenkel. I'm thinking I'm saying and pronouncing that last name correctly. I could be wrong. If I am, just down below. I'm just going to call him Roy here for the sake of simplicity, who was a peer and mentor of Frank Frazetta, who did work in this. And most people would consider buying this just for that book, or for that aspect of the book alone. And I was like, Roy Krenkel and Frank Frazetta. Like, and again, you're saying the name Frank Frazetta, and as a Frank Frazetta fan, like my mind's going, okay, what? So I'm like, okay, let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So there is a fair amount of art in this book, the same as in book number 2 by that same guy. And I did some down the really interesting stories about this guy and his relationship with Frank Frazetta and how he actually got into this whole art thing and how he got into comics and what he did. And there's actually some fairly heavy critical acclaim for one key panel he did. And I'm going to put it up over here for you guys so you can see it. This is a splash panel from a story he did in 1955, I believe, which was part of an EC story, which I guess is where he did most of his work. Now, that's the color panel. Now, what I'll do here for those of you who really want to see the line work, I'm going to change that out and I'm going to put the black and white version up over here as well. Because the stories that are, or sorry, not the stories, the pictures that are in this book are black and white. So if you're looking for color, well, you ain't going to get it here, okay? You're going to get the black and white pencil lines. And because they've been reproduced in this, well, a DAW paperback, they're not looking that good, but you can really see the art that's done in this. And the reproduction might not be that well done, but the actual art itself is phenomenal. I'm going to show you a couple images here. And one of these, when we get to the end, you're going to look at it and you're going to go, that's actually very similar to that splash panel, or at least one aspect of it is very similar to that splash panel we just saw from that 1955 book, where you can really see the continuity of the artist through the work. It's quite interesting. The first one here, I'm going to put up over here. And this is Hadon, and this is a splash panel right at the beginning of the book, which is basically a scene of Hadon when he's winning the games. He's there at the end and he's claiming his prize. He has won. And you'll notice this is really well done. There's a lot of what I'm going to call, I guess I'll call it black space. It's not white space because it's not open space, but it's where you can see the inking has become overpowered in the reproduction that's gone through because it's been done on this low quality paper and paperback. In 1972. So 72 or 74, I think it's 72. Anyway, so you can't really expect that great of an image to come out of that, but it's still really well done. If you go on the interwebs, you can actually see the original pencil and ink version of this that was used prior to reproduction in the story, and it's a lot cleaner. It actually is really nice. Another panel in here that I thought was a nice one, continuing that whole thing where Hadon is in his first quest in the story at the games, is them fighting off these leopards. And this is a key thing within this story. It comes up in this particular story, book within the overall story arc, but it also comes up within the second one, where for some reason they're always fighting leopards and jaguars. And I don't know, like to me that seems odd, but it really does give you a sense of how dangerous this world is that they're living in. Which is kind of cool. So that's that other image. I included that one there. The third one I'm going to show you guys here, and this is a nice one because I want you to look at the landscape around Kwasin. So this image is called Kwasin Kills a Chief, and I put it up over here. And I'll keep it up there for a minute or so because I want you to take a look at that and take a look at the landscape. And what you'll notice is the rocks and the world around and the clouds and the open space at the top of the image. They're very similar to what he did all the way back in 1955 on that initial splash panel I showed you guys. And you can cut back and forth in the video if you want to compare them. But I see real similarities there. And really, it's kind of interesting to me that here I am picking up a paperback published in 1970, I'm going to say it's 1972, with this same artist. And I'm seeing such continuity in their art. Here we are all these years later, 1955 to 1972, and they're still producing this solid gold material. It's really impressive, and honestly, the art itself is quite good. I'm not going to say it's a shame. The cover art on this is quite nice as well. I'll show you an image of that. Not by the same guy, but it's a nice painted picture. It gives you a beautiful depiction of the whole scene. You get three of the main characters are right there, and it is actually done fairly faithfully to the physical descriptions of these characters in the book. So nicely done. I do like that. And honestly, I like the paperback, like the thin book. That to me, it's a cool thing, and I do enjoy that. Okay, that's the administrative piece done. Let's get into the actual story piece that I thought was well done. Okay, let's get into the actual story building side of this thing that was really, really well done, that I thought was kind of cool. And the story side of this that was really well done, that was quite cool. I got the book in front of me, by the way, in case you're curious what I'm looking down at here, is the world building. Now, it's interesting. I'm going to put the book down. A lot of authors, when they're doing this sort of stuff, they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to give you absolutely everything as the reader because you need 100% of it. And that's where you get into scenarios where you've got like Homer, who spends an entire stanza just describing a battle scene depicted on a shield of one of the guys that's in the battle that's actually occurring in the story. Yeah, by our standards, that's a bit much. So by 1972, this guy figured out, hey, you know what? We can do all the world building behind the scenes. We can do all that, set it down, and then just talk on the surface. And what we'll do for the reader is we'll include something at the back called the chronology of Carcosa. And I'm going to put up an image over here. This is actually part of that chronology of Carcosa thing. This is what I think was really well done. So when Philip Jose Farmer, that's such a long name, and I have such a hard time saying that for some stupid reason. What he did here was he said, here's how I'm going to build the whole world. I'm going to build the whole world around all these tribes moving around in this geography and settling over time. I'm going to have a time traveler come in, teach each one of these people the art of domesticating animals, metallurgy, farming, setting up a culture, setting up a religion. I'm going to teach them all these things, knowing full well, because I'm from the future, that all these things clearly were destroyed because there's no record of them existing in my time. Ergo, I'm not really affecting the timeline, and these are fun projects for me, which kind of really diminishes the value of these cultures and these societies that he's creating, because he knows they aren't going to matter. But at the end of the day, he's still doing it. And you've got this 2,000-year chronology, which is put out in that way in that image I just showed you, where he says, okay, this is where the tribes moved to. Here's how they set up. Here's the battles they had. Here's the kings that they had. Ting, 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 ting. Here's all the priestesses that they've had. Ting, 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 ting. Here is the way the culture shifted. And over 2,000 years with Sahhindar's involvement, they took you from this tribal meandering people to a full-blown kingdom. And bear in mind, this is all being done with the author dropping the scarecrow out there through this dark horse of Sahhindar, because everybody loves the dark horse, of, well, none of this really matters at the end of the day. Now, we know that because Hadon and Opar and all this stuff are just part of 10,000-year-old history that exists in Tarzan books only. This is it. Like, in Tarzan's storylines and in Tarzan's world, this was just a footnote, really, more than anything else, because you had the priestess that was her name, of Opar, who's really a pain in the butt for Tarzan. But at the end of the day, this is where her whole thing comes from. This is where her whole shtick originates. And the author's done a great job of building that whole thing out and explaining, well, that's how we got here. And it's interesting because, and I'm going to go back to this one, the chronology is a key one here, but he did a great job of throwing us off the course here and throwing us off the path, because he really wants you as the reader to focus on the worlds created. He's saying, don't pay attention to Sahhindar. Sahhindar's really fantastic and everything like that, but we don't need to go into details on that because he's somewhat minor. And here's what he did at the end of his little 2-page essay before he went through that chronology. And I'm going to read this out to you guys here, okay? All right, so where are we at here? All right, so we're talking about Sahhindar specifically, and these are the last 2 paragraphs of that overall chronology. Sahhindar was also the god of time, though the religion had it that he stole time from his mother Ko, and that was why she exiled him from the land. Sahhindar was said to have been able to travel in time before Ko had taken away this power. So this is really where you get into that whole time travel thing. Undoubtedly, he was a time traveler from the 21st century who had been stranded about 12,000 years BC, bracket, see my Time's Last Gift, Ballantine, 1972, unbracket. Apparently, he was not in the least responsible for the development of civilizations elsewhere, but regarded Carcosa as his private project. He will be referred to throughout this series, but will play only a minor role in a few of the novels. That Sahhindar appeared a number of times in Carcosa over the period of 2,000 years can only be attributed to the age-defying elixir of some sort, which is fascinating because that's it. That's all you got on him. That's the author explaining him right there. We're leaving him as a dark horse. And oh, by the way, in case you're curious, you can go back and read that Time's Last Gift book, which, by the way, that's the next thing I need to do. And, by the way, he's just doing this as a pet project thing. Fascinating that he's done all this world building just to explain a pet project. That is just super, super cool. To me, that is just a fascinating project. It's a fascinating build-in, and it really adds the depth you need so that when you're running through this story, you can get through on the surface. You don't need to dive. You can deep dive if you want to. It's all in the back of the book. But you can do just fine just going through as it is. Really an interesting aspect, and I think he did a great job at that. Okay, let's get into some of the things that were weird, because there was weird in here. All right, let's talk about the weird here. So the weird is going to come in the form of characters, and I'm going to talk about 3 characters in particular here. And it's not because the characters are weird, like they're, or anything like that. No, that's not it. It's in the way the story deals with the characters that just sort of makes you go, what? And honestly, the big one for me comes to the character of Awineth. Now, hold on. There we go. Awineth is a weird one for me because I don't get her. I don't get her at all, actually. It's funny because in book 2, we already did a review on that. Awineth becomes really this sort of nemesis, evil, just manipulative person. You don't want, she's nasty. But in this story, she's the very queen that Hadon is competing in Quest 1 for to win the hand of. And for some reason, she's desperately in love with Hadon. I don't understand that. It's the strangest thing. Like, I don't see in the story where she would have built up this desperate love for this character that she's had absolutely nothing to do with. And it's almost one of these things where you kind of ask yourself, you say, well, hold on. Are you in love with Hadon? Are you in love with the idea of Hadon? They're 2 totally different things. And again, I know this is, again, not a relationship channel. We're not going to get into that, but that's just strange. And I don't understand where all of her anger comes from later on, because, yeah, so what? Hadon wants to decide he wants to be with Lalita. Let him go. I don't mind somewhat blown on that one. Okay. Character 2. Now, we showed an image of this. I'm going to show the image again. Okay, here's the image again. Okay, so the title of this image is Quasin Slays the Chief. Quasin is Hadon's cousin. Quasin is a grade A ass. Like, I want to use stronger words here. There's no reason why anybody should like Quasin at all. Other than the fact that he's apparently some giant, bulking monstrosity of a dude that just can kill 10 people at a time with his bare hands. And I get it, he's a giant barbarian. Like, take the Barbarian brothers from the movie The Barbarians, which is a classic, by the way. Blend them into one body, so they're just one giant mass. And that's what I picture this Quasin person to be. And I gotta tell you, that's pretty freaking horrifying. But he's an ass, like a real ass. Okay, there's a lot of things I could say about Quasin. Bottom line is, you are not meant to like Quasin. You'll know why if you read the book. Enough. Moving on from Quasin. Strange dude, not really sure why he had to be that big of an ass. But whatever. Moot point. The last one here is really Lalita. Lalita plays a central and pivotal role in book 2. She, for those of you who cannot remember this one, is the blonde lady that Hadon goes all the way to the far north to find and bring back. And there's a lot of backstory to her in here that's inferred and is specifically spoken to by Paga, who is the manling that hangs around with her. And there's a lot of story about really how she's too beautiful for her own good, which is kind of a really strange statement, a really strange sentiment to have, but that she's constantly causing trouble inadvertently just by being herself and being in places. And it really, it's somewhat tragic in the way this whole thing comes about. But the character itself is mostly silent. Lalita does very little discussing for herself. Paga speaks for her. From time to time, she'll answer questions, she'll have brief conversations. But most of the actual interaction with Lalita is done with eyes and body language. There's very little actual dialogue. And here's the really weird part for me. And again, this one just sort of, it maybe, so I'm gonna just break out the book here, okay? We'll just give me a minute here. And y'all can infer whatever you want from this one, but this one just sort of made me go, what? It made me, what? And for good reason, okay? So where were we here? Okay, so, by the way, Lalita only appears on page 123 out of 199, so that could be a reason why there's very little actual dialogue with her. Anyways, the whole dialogue here is about the whole point that Sahhindar found them, saved them from, I guess, being stuck on a raft or being stuck, whatever that was they were doing. And at the bottom line, he sent them off to the south where they'd be safe while he went off to the north. Oh, by the way, Lalita, I trained your entire people to do what they're doing. Oh, Paga, your entire tribe, I trained them to do what they're doing. Carcosa's over that way. I trained them what to do. You'll be fine. By the way, I gotta go. I gotta go find the people that are from where I'm from. And it's the strangest thing. And where are we here? Ah, here we go. Lalita's talking to Hadon. And this totally comes out of left field. And it's just one of those weird ones for me. Perhaps he would not have left us if he had known that I was bearing his child, Lalita said. But then I didn't know it myself. Of course, that didn't matter in the end since I lost it 2 moons after it was conceived. What? And there's other comments in here that are kind of odd where Sahhindar makes a comment and he says, you know, the bottom line, and Paga actually makes the comment as well. He's like, you know, it's interesting, a couple paragraphs later, that Lalita is actually a direct descendant of Sahhindar anyways. And, oh, by the way, Sahhindar actually made a comment that he was actually a direct descendant from himself, but at the time they all went, well, but you don't even know what that means. And I was like, this is such a weird, that one just, I was like, hold on. She was pregnant with Sahhindar's child and he just wandered. I was like, maybe he didn't know, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Who knows? I'm not here to judge. To me, that was just a weird throw in the story where I was like, okay, that whole chapter of the whole Lalita thing, maybe that should be dove into a little bit more. Just maybe. So, as I say, 3 characters. These are the weird things for me. Awineth, Kawassan, and Lalita herself. I don't know. I wish there was more into that and to actually explain a little bit more how these characters got to where they were. But I think the issue here actually comes to one of the good points that I mentioned earlier was this author does a really good job of giving you what you need to know and doesn't actually just bury you with all the extra details that you don't necessarily need to know. Maybe this is just a me thing. That's why I think it's weird. Anyways, all right, let's get into next steps on this thing. All right, next steps. So here's the bottom line on this thing. Did I actually enjoy this book? I actually really did enjoy this book. I thought this was super cool. And in the intro, I mentioned the whole point that in my own mind, I was convinced that this guy was sort of stealing this world from the Hyborian Age. And how happy I was when I found out that he actually didn't, and that this was actually his own world building. The chronology that was sitting in the back of this did such a good job of building out this entire universe for me that I was like, mind blown. I really enjoyed that aspect of this. The art that was thrown in here, also really cool. And when you learn the background about this Roy guy who did all this, it's like, wow. And honestly, I wish I knew that before I read it. I would have spent more time looking at the images originally when I was reading through the book. There were those little weird nuances in there where I wish there was more behind the Awineth character. I wish there was more behind Lalita. I wish there was a little less behind Kawassan. But you know what? These are minor things. The overall story itself was really cool. 2 quests and a dungeon crawl. That's really well done and packed into 199 pages without burying me in stupid details. I enjoyed this thing. Now, what are the next steps? Well, I gotta go find Time's Lost Gift because now I gotta go back again and find out who the heck this Sahhindar guy is to begin with. Why is he creating this little project cultures all over the place and, well, quite frankly put, just seeding the land with his children everywhere he goes. Fascinating character, and maybe it's just a me thing, but I'm not gonna be able to let that one go. I gotta go find out. Y'all might want to find that one out yourself when you finish reading this one, but my suggestion is go pick this one up. I would suggest you don't do what I did though. Read the first book, then read the second book. Don't do it the other way because quite frankly put, you're gonna go down one heck of a garden path in that second one. Well, everybody, that's our video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next one. All right, it is Easter egg time. It's post-credit scene time, and we are in a totally different spot in the library today because I moved the chair over. I gotta tell you, I wanted to sit over there, but the lighting for some reason coming over here was so dark, it looked like I was in a cave, which was horrifying. So now you get little tiny me over in the corner of your screen and all that over there because, well, I don't want to be front and center anymore. Okay, for those of you who know these Easter egg things, what we do here is we sit down and we just have an impromptu chat. Normally the chat's fairly one-sided because I can't hear you. I'm hoping you guys are actually engaged in the conversation at home and that we're having a good dialogue here, but honestly, sometimes I doubt that. You know, maybe tippity down below and let me know. Anyways, a while back, and this is like a hot minute back, we did a video where we talked about the Conan the Barbarian magazine adaptation of the 1982 movie. Well, the DVD is right over there. You can see it over there. In that, I said two things. One, this is a really cool watercolor painting. Like, it's the colorization of that was really, really neat. The other thing that I thought was really cool about it was I said, well, this is a magazine, but I know there's a 2-issue comic. I wonder what the comic's like. Does the comic differ? And then I thought to myself, well, why would they make a magazine and then made a comic adaptation? That seems strange to me. I thought, is it because they're trying to get around the Comics Code Authority and include content in the magazine that you wouldn't be able to include in a comic book? And I thought that might be the rationale why. Or it's just a quick cash grab and you want to be able to sell both. I don't know. Maybe people think that, you know, the younger kids will pick up the magazine, sorry, the comic, and the older folks will pick up the magazine, so why not sell to both markets? I couldn't tell you. Honestly, I couldn't. I think that might be the case, but I think I'm wrong. Here's why. Here's my thought process on this one. I actually did get my hands on the 2-issue comic set. Now, I'm going to put an image up over there, and that is the front page of the actual magazine, okay? That's the frontispiece, right in the front of the actual comic story, and you'll see the coloration there, and this is what made me step back and say, this is watercolor, and this is really cool. It's different than what I would normally see. I'm going to switch that now. Here's the front page of the comic. Now, obviously, there's letterboxes all over the comic one. It looks a lot different because you've got title splash on there. It's not quite the same thing. It's difficult to see it, but what I want you to do is go back and forth here and look at the smoke. The smoke is the dead giveaway. You'll see in the smoke, the striation lines, the ink lines, the pencil lines are the same between the two versions. The color and where it's either darker or lighter differs. Somebody colored this story twice. Once for the magazine and once for the comic. And I think that's fascinating. I don't know why. And again, I'm not in the biz. I have no idea. If any of you were there and you can comment, by all means, down below. I would love to hear why that's the case. Okay, so coloration, totally different. There is definitely something different between these two things. Why? I don't know. But honestly, I'm so glad I have the watercolor version because it looks super cool. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn the camera around and we're actually gonna look at the transition points because I went through these two panel by panel. Nothing is different except for the transition where the comic goes from issue 1 to issue 2. For some reason, we've edited and moved around panels. Okay, let's turn it around. Let's take a look at this. We're gonna go old school for the channel. We're actually gonna have the camera looking down at the desk. We're gonna walk through these. All right, we're back to it. Now we got the camera turned around here. Here is the magazine. Let's make this rather quick, right? You'll remember I picked up a really crappy copy of this one because it's the only one I've ever seen. Here, you know what? While we got the camera turned around, let's do this as well. There's that splash panel I mentioned earlier where I showed you guys the thing. Here, let me give you a side-by-side on this. Side-by-side. Here we go. Here. Take a look at that. Now, do you see the difference here? Now, I'll tell you what really gives it away for me. Look down by his arm over here. See the bright spot here. See how much diminished that is over here. Okay, look at the bright spot following this trail of hair. Here, it's huge. Look at it over here. It's completely encompassed that space. Clearly different coloring, different work has been done here. Like the whole tunic is much darker over here than it is over here. His mother, totally different. Look at all the bright spots over here on her, not here at all. Very different coloring. It does just leave me wondering, why did you color this twice? It's just such a strange thing to me. But I don't know. I'm not in the biz. Somebody else can answer that one. Okay, let's get to the transition pages. Now, the transition pages really happen here when we are attacking the tower, when we're stealing The Eye set. Yes, we gotta go steal the thing. And this is where we start to see the transition, okay? So I'm gonna flip over here to the end. And where are we here? Okay, so what you got, and both of these are crappy issues, but crappy conditioned books, by the way. So yeah, I feel comfortable doing this. I'm not too concerned about the collectability. So this page here matches this page here. No real difference. That seems to be just stoic. Okay, we got it. So let's flip over to the next page, shall we? This is where things are going to start getting a little different, okay? So check this. This panel. Hold on, how am I going to do this here? Let's do it this way. This panel here, gone. Doesn't exist. We're jumping right over to this panel. This panel here, it's that one there. Look at it. We've gone from here to here, cutting both of these panels. These three here, in the middle of the page over here. Okay, I got it. What do we got over here? These three here, right over here. Slay the infidels, slay the infidels. Okay, so we only really cut 2 panels here. Okay, we're shifting things up a little bit. All right, let's open the beginning of the next one. Got a splash page. Splash page. Splash page. Gone. This page, gone. Does not make sense to me. This panel here, right here, I got it. These two, right there. This seems to be just covering it. Isn't that weird? And these two are gone. And then you flip over to the next page where everything's back to normal and we're in the bar. Now, none of those panels, to me, really were something that would be outside of Comics Code Authority. This wouldn't be. I mean, if you're saying don't jump off a building, well, I can see that. Well, you're jumping off a building here. That's in a comic. There's nothing super violent about these 2 panels. If anything, that's worse. Weird, right? I don't grasp the layout. Now, maybe it was because they wanted to do a giant splash page at the beginning of issue number 2. I could see that being an issue. But that's just odd. So cool. So slight difference. There you go. Okay, back to you guys. Like I said, this was an interesting one. And I gotta tell you, the fact that we had sudden panels that were just moved around or gone altogether, especially when the panels didn't really add or detract anything, that was weird. Especially when you're looking at someone like, well, hold on. If these weren't necessary, then why were they even in the magazine? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. I like the extra panels in the magazine. I like the extra Buscema art. It's fantastic. Keep it in there. But why? I don't understand. To me, this transition just seems strange, and I can't see why it happened. If any of you know, down below, I'd love to hear it. Is it a page count thing? Could be. I haven't counted the pages. Maybe you guys have. Oh, I don't know. Hey, everybody. That's the video for this week. We'll see you in the next one.